Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's time for part two-ish. It's time for another part on this little red wagon here, right? So, got it in the garage. Motor's running. It's still rough. It's not right. They got some more work to do on there. That's not part two though. Part two is the part that I have been putting off for 20 years. And this could be part 2, 3, 4, 5. This could be a lot of parts. I'm not sure how long this is going to take. It's been a long time since I've undertaken anything this significant. Part 2 is this front axle swap. Looking here, we have this lovely, let me try to get some light on here, Dana 30C, which stands for closed knuckle, Dana 30C front axle. So it's a closed knuckle axle. It's a pretty obsolete axle. It has somewhere around the range of 10-inch drum brakes. It is sitting on 36-inch long leaf springs that are 1 3/4 wide. So the ride quality on there, it's not that great. So rough ride quality, poor brakes. The brakes were perfectly fine at 50 miles an hour when this thing was originally designed and built. 50 miles an hour cruise along on 28-inch road tires. Those brakes work just fine. You start hitting freeway speeds 65, 70, 75 miles an hour and you go to stop, those little drums, they don't quite have what it takes, especially if you start increasing your rolling stock. And we're going to increase the rolling stock. It probably had 28-inch tires from the factory. Right now it's got some 33s on it. We're going to be moving up to 35s is what I'm building this around. Additionally, we have one other issue, and that is it's just worn out. Here, jump in here. Take a look. We got our fantastic steering wheel right here. Let's take this thing to right about the point. Right about there is where all the take up and the slop is out of it to the right. And right about there to the left. So let's do this again, all the way to the left. Now, all the way to the right. It's, man. That's better than 90 degrees of steering wheel slop. And that slop is all taken up in several spots, right? We have this steering linkage bar right here coming off of the steering box. It's a fantastic setup, it really is, but it's just the ends of that are worn out. But it's quite fascinating to see how they came up with and engineered this. Instead of a pitman arm pushing parallel with the axle, this is pushing perpendicular to the axle. And you can see here my steering arm is coming out parallel to the axle. That's the opposite of what you see on a modern vehicle nowadays. So as this piece comes forward or back, that's what turns it. It's still the same, it's still just a linkage, but we just don't do that anymore, especially with the advent of power steering. The advantage to them doing that is our steering box is way back in there, coming right out of the cab. Yeah, we just don't do that anymore. We put our steering box, now we put a modern steering box right up here, put everything in line, and we get more control that way. Unfortunately, that's going to require a lot of work. Let me, coming in, as you can see with this V8, I have somewhere in the range of 3 inches. Yeah, 3 inches or so of clearance to come out of the firewall and then to get down to the frame rail for my steering wheel, my steering column. That's going to be pretty tight. We'll make it work. We'll get that figured out. It's not a big deal. You can actually see the original steering column coming out right here down to the steering box, and that's right there by my exhaust manifold. What does all that mean? Well, I'm not even through with all the problems or challenges on this thing. My leaf springs on this front end are somewhere to the tune of, can I even do this? Let's see if we can get a tape measure back in there. I believe that these leaf springs, look at that, 36 inches. 36 inches long, 1.75 inches wide. You can't hardly find anything less than 45 inches on modern vehicles. Well, most modern vehicles don't even run leaf springs anymore. Here's what that means though. I have a 36-inch leaf spring with a centered pin. That means I have 18 inches from the axle to my front shackle spring hanger. I can either reuse these springs, I can use springs out of a pre-76 CJ5, Jeep CJ5, I believe those are 36 inches for the front, same width. Or what I want to do is I want to move to a more modern spring. I want to move to a 2.5-inch wide, longer spring. Jeep Grand Wagon or Wagoneers, J20 trucks, their front leaf springs are 2.5 inches wide. I have a set of rear leaf springs out of a Wagoneer, but they are 2.5 inches wide. They're wider. They're at least 4 to 10 inches longer. I'll check my specs, and that gives you a softer ride while you're going down the freeway, but it's still more controllable than these 36s. Those 36s they're rough riding, more prone to what do you call that, death wobble, when well, actually your death wobble is part of your steering, but the suspension does have some effect on that. So what that means is, if I want to go with a modern axle, more modern axle, better leaf springs, so that I can get power brakes, that means we have to lengthen this frame rail out. Probably, I figure we're going to have to lengthen that frame rail 2, 3, 4 inch, probably 3 inches. Well, we'll know more when we actually get the leaf springs here in place. Then we have to make a decision. Are we going to go spring over or spring under the axle? Spring under, I mean, just exactly what it says. This is spring under the axle. So my axle tube is sitting on top of the springs. If I reverse that and put the spring over the top of the axle, that gives me probably a good solid 5 inches of lift. That's plenty of clearance for the tire size we're running. The downside to that is I got to reconfigure that front axle because it's already configured for a spring under application. So we'll work on that. We'll think about that. We'll price out the lift springs. Now, lift springs are an option. They don't ride as nice as stock springs. So everything has its pluses and its minuses, and that's, well, I guess that's the crux of engineering or fabrication or planning. There's no such thing as a perfect solution. 4 links, 5 links, they have pluses and minuses. Leaf springs, lifted springs, pluses and minuses. And you always have to factor into account the budget. And let's be honest, that's a driving factor in this build, is the budget. So, well, that's enough talking. I'm going to do a little bit of work. Did I mention I'm a little bit terrified of this project? I hope you get that impression because, well, I got to jack it up more. The problem with this project is once I get started, I'm sucking up this entire garage bay until it's done, until it's back up and in operation. So that's not always that's all. Hopefully there's a good picture. That's kind of a terrifying thing to consider, especially because this isn't a quick turnaround project. You see, this project, there's no kits for it. I can't just order a kit to swap all this out. It's going to be custom fabricated with whatever tools I have and skills that I have. And let's face it, There's guys a lot more skilled out there than I am. All right, let's go grab that axle for that WIlly wagon. It's pretty swampy out here today. Hopefully we can do this without making too big of a mess. So what we got here, we've got a Dana 44 out of probably about a 1980 Jeep Wagoneer. It's a good solid axle. It's good for up to 35-inch tires unless we start adding a locker to it, right? So if I keep this an open differential, it should live just fine with 35-inch tires, especially because we're not building this wagon up to be an off-roader. It's not going to be a rock crawler. It's going to be a driver and a trail runner. Whatever you want to call it. It's going to be a fun vehicle. And so I've had this Waggy front axle for quite some time. I don't have the springs for it because they ended up on my, well, I'm talking about it, my CJ5 over here. So it's got Waggy front leaf springs all the way around, which gives that a really nice supple suspension. But regardless, I've got this front axle and it's in shape. I'm not going to say good shape. It's been sitting outside too long. I made more work for myself than I needed to, but that's all right. Let's go in there and let's try to swap a couple of axles around. My goal for today is to get this axle in position so that we can sort out the steering and an understanding of how it's all going to fit together. It's not going to be sitting in a operational state, but I just want to get this sitting down so I can start building the steering and the brakes and everything else around that. So that's my goal for today. So I got a lot of work to do. Let's just get at it. All right, so the wagon is sitting up on some jack stands so that it's not going to fall over and crush me to death. I should only be horribly maimed instead of absolutely devastated. So yeah, let's rip this front axle out. We'll just all right, I think we're ready. We'll try to roll this Dana 30, 35, Dana 30, I think it's a Dana 30 closed knuckle axle out of here. All right, thanks bud. So you can see the difference. This is a Dana 44 axle. So this is a half-ton axle, front axle. It's typically found in half-ton to three-quarter-ton trucks. Three-quarter-ton, yeah. And this is a Dana, I don't remember if it's a 30 or 35C. So the C stands for closed knuckle. So here's the difference. Modern axles just have a U-joint right in there. That U-joint is what allows you to transmit power when your wheels pivot and turn. This has a similar U-joint in there, but this U-joint is lubricated by amalgamation of oil and grease that's packed in there. Whereas your typical U-joints, they maintain the grease underneath the cap. U-joints are way easier to maintain, they're way easier to service. But if you just take a quick look back, you can just see the difference in the axle tube size and the pinion housing, the pinion size. This axle was never intended for anything other than what it was. So dirt road driving with stock size tires. This axle on this vehicle will give me a lot of life. What? A new Band-Aid? But I like my sparkly Band-Aid. See, look how sparkly it is.
This one is regular.
Well, yeah, but I've already got a Band-Aid on. I don't need another one.
That finger looks a little hurt.
I think I'm okay. Thank you. What do you think, Bud? Is this going to work out for us? Bigger, stronger axle to go underneath this Jeep?
It is way lower.
Way lower?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's got smaller tires on it right now. We'll get some bigger tires for it, though, pretty soon.
Like those?
Yeah, bigger than that. Like the same size that are on the CJ.
Oh.
Oh, dear. Yeah, there we go. I think we have a seized up axle. Yep, our brake is seized up on here. See how the whole thing's rolling?
Oh.
That's fine. We'll fix it. Okay, hold yours right about there, bud. That's about right there. All right, here we are again. As you can see, this new axle, the standard 44, is in position. It's not in place, it's in position. And if I look right around here, this is my spring perch. Spring's supposed to be fully underneath it, and we have about an inch and a quarter where we're offset of the spring perch on both sides. That's telling us that we need our springs to be shifted out roughly an inch and a quarter. In fact, now I gotta think about that. My brain might be hurting a little bit. But not only do the springs have to be shifted out, once again, we've discussed this, we're going to swap out these 1 3/4 springs with 2.5 inch springs. What does that mean? That means I'm waiting for parts. So we've got to order the parts for the rest of this front end suspension. I do have one U-bolt just holding it in place so it doesn't flop around on us. But yeah, we got to get some parts on order and put this front suspension together. So like I talked about, my goal for today was to get this axle in position and to really verify what we're going to be starting with. Now I've got more work I can do. In fact, I want to keep on continuing on. We're going to take off a fender here so that we can pull out the rest of the steering components, starting back up through in there, because that's all part of this whole front end. This is one of those parts of the project you can't do just a little bit at a time. You got to go and get it all done. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep on plugging away, and I'll clean up some of this mess, and then I'll make more mess. But this is kind of a bit par for the course. So, gentlemen, when you start projects like this, you got to be ready to just let it sit and wait while you're waiting for the right parts to show up. Sometimes you don't know what parts to order until you get into it. Sometimes you just don't want to order the parts because you know it's going to cost a lot of money. You're like, oh, dang it, I could buy some other cool stuff with that. But that's part of it, right? We have to make our choices on what we're going to work on and how we're going to prioritize this. I'm pretty excited with how this is coming along. This axle is going to fit in there. Going to have a lot of work to get this axle back into condition. It's been sitting outside for far too long. But that's just what we'll do. So we're going to keep at this thing. I'm going to keep making a mess here and just see what we can get done.